Good afternoon. So it's a cozy gathering today. Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Asia-Europe Cultural Festival, Cultures Connect. We have our public forum this afternoon, and we have a very special and exciting group of speakers with us today. So may I invite, starting with our moderator, Siddharth Chadda, who joins us from Sweden. Thank you, Sid. And could we please have Natalie Hennedige, who comes all the way from Singapore. And Ratri Anindajati from Indonesia. And then we have Roberto Casarotto from Aerowaves Italy. And last but not the least, Stefan Noel from Switzerland.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
All right. So everyone's cozy in their seats now. So I hand over to Siddharth to please initiate the discussion. Thank you so much. And enjoy the discussion, everyone. We will have a moment for Q&A with the audience as well. So do feel free to raise questions later once the discussion is done. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, isn't it, after 3 years of different sorts of lockdowns and social restrictions and so on. And we're here today to talk about festivals, and festivals celebrate what is probably most important to human existence and experience, which is the ability to come together and witness artistic expression. Festivals have for long given us intense experiences, deep joy. They pull us out of our mundane lives and help us join in celebration and play. And especially in context of Asia and Europe, they fostered cross-border collaborations, exchange, and creative dialogues for a very long time. But today, of course, after the pandemic, festivals stand at crossroads. In today's world, they're faced with various social and economic challenges, much like other aspects of our lives. And this is the time that we take the opportunity to talk to our speakers about how these festivals can re-examine themselves. How do they find their lost essence? How do they cope with some of the challenges? What are the challenges that they're faced with, and how do they cope with them? So today we have this wonderful panel with us, leading figures from the arts sectors, and we're going to probe their minds about some of the questions that festivals today are faced with. During the conversation, our focus is not really to just have a surface account of the past 3 years, but we really want to talk about the way forward. How do we move ahead? And come back to what festivals have given us, and we hope continue to give us, which is celebration, joy, community, and culture. So today we have with us 4 panelists. To my left, it's Ratri Anindajati. Ratri is a creative producer and a cultural manager from Jakarta, Indonesia. She holds a degree in political science and a master's of fine arts in creative producing from the California Institute of Arts. Having learned various dances since childhood, Ratri has been involved in IDF since 2006. And in this year, in September, she was appointed.
Oh, the festival's in October.
Yeah. She's been appointed the director of the IDF. She plans to expand IDF's international network, develop residency programs there, and support the making of new works and continues to provide spaces for all performing artists to grow in the Indonesian and the broader industry. And then to my right is Roberto Casarotto. Since 2006, Roberto was responsible for the dance projects and programs for the Centro per la Scena Contemporanea di Bassano del Grappa, CSC. Excellent, thank you. And Opera State Festival in Venice. He's the associate director now of Aerowaves, or the co-director of Aerowaves. Co-director of Aerowaves. He's a member of the board of the European Dance House Network. He's currently involved in several international projects. He develops initiatives aimed at supporting artistic research, mobility, and artistic development in the field of dance, the engagement of communities and participation of citizens in cultural activities. And then, to my extreme right, is Natalie Hennedige. She's the director of the Singapore International Festival of the Arts. She's best known as the artistic director of Cake, a contemporary performance company presenting progressive works at the intersection of theater and a range of other disciplines. She's the recipient of the National Arts Council's Young Artists Award and the JCCI Singapore Foundation Culture Award in 2010. Natalie has defined a 3-year arc intended to bring focus to performance and creation in the physical and the online space around the recurring title, The Anatomy of a Performance. And then on my extreme left is Stéphane Noël, an independent producer from Switzerland. He's worked as a producer and curator of contemporary dance, music, and theater. He was the director of the Les Urbanis Festival in Lausanne in 97 and 98. He's the co-director of the Belluard Bolwerk International Festival in Fribourg from 2004 to 2007. He collaborated with several institutions in Paris, in Lyon, with the Swiss Arts Council, the city of Zurich, Basel, Mudak, and so on. And at present, he is working with artists both from Europe and Asia. So welcome all to today's discussion. Thank you. The first part of this discussion, we want to focus on the role of festivals in framing international cultural exchanges and cultural policy so that we can begin with a bit of a broad view. And my first question is for you, Roberto. You're widely known as somebody who has developed programs which support a lot of artistic mobility and research. According to you, are festivals the right platform to do this? And especially, we've been talking a lot about co-creation, which is not simply just exchange, but providing a platform that is sustainable and creates diverse voices. What are your thoughts about it?
Thank you for the question. I think festivals are still a fantastic resource. Potentially, they are a fantastic resource as long as they stay responsive to the changes that the world is going through. I think that with the pandemic, we entered in a new era where many events that happen have an impact, which is global, which is quite rapid, which is quite strong in the way it manifests. And this is a new thing for humankind. So I think we shall consider the festival as, a way, an interface to connect with people, to exchange, to develop ideas, to share knowledge, to develop new knowledge, but as long as they stay connected with the reality. And at the time being, I think we have, of course, to rethink the way we work, the way we connect, the way we move across borders and continents, and somehow consider how humanity is charged with many traumas, with many urges. And so I believe that we probably need to develop new ways to respond to the contingencies. Maybe a collective response is a way, but I think that a collective response is possible if we share common values. And that's the starting point for our discourse today, I would say.
Thank you. Natalie, you've been with a contemporary theater production company for a long time, and you're widely acclaimed. How do you look at the question of framing international exchange and cultural policy from the perspective of being a producer and a creative practitioner?
Okay. So, you know, I look at sort of each festival personified exists like a person with a distinct and multifaceted personality. So if you carefully take in the textures of a festival, you gain a distinct sense of what the festival cares about, how they communicate via the ideas and works they project, and how they bridge people from the arts communities they represent. So many cities across Asia cradle international performing arts festivals like SIFA, the Singapore International Festival of the Arts. And in each of these cities, right, the festival celebrates the diverse artists of the land and the varied art practices. So essentially, festivals cultivate multiplicity. They are a platform for sharing unique perspectives and delivering cultural pluralism while retaining a strong essence of the city that they occupy and the diverse range of artists that inhabit the space. Festivals can also be socially and globally engaged entities that serve as channels of connection and communication between people and communities, exchanging ideas and facilitating dialogue. So in general, I see that as a potent function of festivals. I think there are no two similar festivals. I think each festival is nuanced in its own way, but I think some of the things that I described are things that I tried to define and tried to put in place for the Singapore International Festival of the Arts.
Thank you. Roberta, you spoke about, you gave us a wonderful starting point of talking about shared values, and I think Natalie has also sort of spoken in the same vein about the sort of values that the festival space actually imbibes or should imbibe and so on. I would like to bring Ratri into the conversation. And as the director of the IDF, the Indonesian Dance Festival, and you've traveled around the world with your critical practice and engaged and worked and developed several artists, how do you see some of these values shaping up in the festival and the role of them, and particularly inclusivity? And again, I ask you from the point of your own practice.
Yeah, thank you. So when I speak about where I come from or the context of the Indonesian Dance Festival, and in such a platform where we are now, I have to remind both myself and also everyone who is here that Indonesia consists of 17,000 islands, and within it, you know, we have the well of diversity, local values, heritage, which are the foundation of our contemporary arts practice and creation, is already in its own poses a different kind of inclusivity that we have to remember, and especially because the IDF is located in Jakarta, which is its closest, it's the capital city closest to the main resources, which is the government funding. And so inclusivity for us means first and foremost giving access and try our best to be equal in giving resources and opportunities to our friends across the archipelago. That first, and then now I'm observing there's like an emergence or camaraderie within the our networks, especially regional networks in the Asian countries. So we are also trying to curate more from Asian countries that are less heard of, Kyrgyzstan or maybe the mid-Asia and other Southeast Asian countries. So, and then, you know, it grows from there. But yeah, I would say we start with that.
Stefan, if I can bring you into the conversation and gather your thoughts about the shared values of the festivals, such as responsibility and inclusivity.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me among this very nice group of people. The way I see it is we have basically three stakeholders to serve the audience, to serve the general public or the audience of a festival. And I've been lucky enough to be working on those three corners. And it's clear to me that, so the three stakeholders are the public institution, the festivals or the presenters, and then the artists. And the festival is very key in shaping the relationship between the artist and the institution, between the artist and the audience, of course. And also, they are the ones who are the most able to shape the values of the institution, because the link between institution and artist is very weak. It's very marked with power and asymmetrical power. And there's also a shyness. And if you are then in a festival context as an international artist, you don't have access at all to those institutions because you don't understand the context. So the main partner for everybody, I feel, is the festival. And then I, as a producer, my responsibility is how can I help the festival help me and help my peers and help the other artists to generate good conditions to continue working and presenting work to an audience.
Right. So, I mean, one of the key things that we see post-pandemic, you know, while thinking through these relationships, is particularly the slower international mobility trend. You know, and we know that one of the main impacts of the mobility has affected the Asia mobilities, which is the mobilities within the Asian countries, and the Asia-Europe mobility. As far as Europe is concerned, you know, it's a more well-connected, well-networked continent. So you see that the return of mobility in Europe is coming back. What challenges do you think today are really confront the festivals in terms of fostering international mobility, which they had so successfully done for 20, 30 years or maybe a little more?
Personally, I think that we should consider Asia a bit differently because it's home of half of the world's population, and it's very big, and it's very, very diverse in language, religions, ethnicities. It's separated by water. And I feel that mobility in most of India has always been quite slow. This notion of slow mobility that we introduced from Europe is not really comparable, but kind of existed before. Also for financial reasons, obviously. So when COVID hit, I feel that suddenly we in the West started to realize that mobility is not granted. It's not what we considered not even as a right, but as automatic thing we had access to. Suddenly it was more complicated. For me, it was very important to understand the artists I work with from Asia. Before they had difficulties getting a visa, but then they have no way of getting a visa. And it was very interesting to see that we have very good passports here and that we can travel, we can hop on a plane, we can hop on a train, which is a very nice thing for Western Europe. And so it was quite interesting to have this moment of suddenly the West stopped and had to adapt the rhythm of the rest of the planet. And this situation, I feel, provoked also very positive things. I guess we are all a bit tired of going on Zoom now, but opening Zoom kind of open conversation, and I think also that my partners in Europe who had institutions that support them, that pay them a salary, express their solidarity through opening their Zoom windows to us and to engaging with the artists in another way. So, of course, we are totally screen tired and happy to be here in person, but this is something that kind of leveled the play field a little bit, very little bit. The reality of our passports, the differences remained, and financial access remain. So now, the way I see it, my hope is that we continue on the good practice that were happening before the pandemic. For instance, over the last 20 years, I've been working 25 years now, I can see a big difference on how festivals and presenters are knowledgeable in getting a visa, in getting a work permit, in respecting the different cultures of the people they welcome to the festival. And this is something we need to continue building up, and I'm absolutely not afraid that it will disappear, because we are more aware of this, and we have learned and we are sharing. And another thing that I think is super important is, of course, it doesn't make sense to fly an artist from wherever for 12 hours to do 2 shows and fly back. This is something that we cannot take as a global community anymore. Our planet cannot take this. But it would be also very sad that we stop seeing the other on stage. And now we are in Asia-Europe Forum, so the other for us would be mostly Asian artists, but also the queerness other and the disability other. This embodiment of the otherness on stage is very important. So now what is happening is that a lot of festivals, and I agree with you, Natalie, festivals have their own identity based on where they are, the work they had before, the other festivals around them. But it doesn't mean that you cannot have your identity if you share some artists with other festivals. And it's something that's happening now, and that I salute, that I want to encourage, because before it was not possible. If you play in Paris, not possible to play in Marseille. Or there's kind of tension of, this is my artist. And this has changed with time, and now it becomes more sustainable ecologically and financially to have a long trip to present your work and present it to different audiences, and also to the diversity of Europe as a very, I mean, it's smaller than Asia, but it's quite different cultures brought together.
Thank you. Roberto, I'd like to bring you into this conversation as well, and you're an active developer of festivals and festival networks and so on. How is this issue of international mobility unfolding in your current practice, and how do you see the future?
From the perspective of Aerowaves, which is a network that brings together 44 partners from 33 countries of geographical Europe, and is in dialogue with the other continents, we are really rethinking the sustainability of mobility. So the physical mobility is very much intertwined with questions around the financial sustainability. We discovered during the pandemic that many forms of remunerations are not fair, and they don't take into consideration the changes in the cost of living that we're facing all over the globe. So in that perspective, we are, of course, rethinking the length, the timeline of these movements. But on another hand, we are also trying to reconsider the value of establishing long-term relationships. So in that perspective, can we rethink the way we collaborate across the continent, even in terms of reciprocity, and I mean by maybe thinking together what it is to maybe design a sort of macro-regional source of opportunities when we move an artist from another continent. So we're thinking, is it possible to create collaboration among partners that inhabit several geographical proximate areas and create more options for the work of artists. This means that also the concept of festival changes a bit. So it's not just about the events, but it's about collateral activities that most of the times when you deal with artists that come from other cultures and continents are very valuable to exchange and somehow bring new tools to connect again across cultures. So I think that's all in the agenda. As much as the idea to share responsibility about how a program in a festival can shift the perspectives towards excellence and beauty and somehow build alternative definitions. And we can do it only together with partners from other contexts. So we can absolutely bring together different voices.
Thank you. I'd also like to bring some perspective from Asia into this conversation. I'll begin with Ratri. What is your take on international mobility coming from Indonesia and the IDF right now?
Yeah, just hearing Stefan spoke just now made me remember of maybe 8-10 years ago when I just began entering or exposing myself to this global network of the arts. And still thinking then as someone coming from Indonesia that if I made it or if I make it to Europe, then it's kind of like a stamp on like a paper or something that I've made it somewhere. But I remember thinking it was weird that it was easier for me to travel in different countries in Europe being an Asian, and I've been doing that more than actually myself traveling in my region. So now, being the director of the IDF and the emergence of this regional network that we want to push through more, like we are more aware, okay, yeah, like why do we always need to try to tour our artists to Europe? Why are we not touring within each of our own island and then Asia? And of course, there's a question of the resources, which we still have to always consider, because then if we're invited, by a European platform, then we don't really think about the resources, or it's just readily available. So there has been now with colleagues in Asia a creation of something called the Festival Consortium, where we are intentionally speaking about co-producing, co-commissioning, and making sure the work that we are co-producing with each other are touring in the respective festivals that are part of the consortium. So that's just the beginning. It's not a new way. We did it already in the past before the pandemic, but I think it's more in the awareness and in intention, yeah.
Thank you. To bring Natalie also into the conversation, your thoughts about the question of mobility, its present and future.
Sure. I mean, I think that mobility, moving a work, giving a work a life beyond a festival, giving a work a life beyond a showing or two is desired by all art makers, by all festivals. But coming into the festival, I also the first thing I did was try to understand how this festival sits within the city. And I came to a realization that a festival is also, even a pinnacle performing arts festival, like the Singapore International Arts Festival, pinnacle in Singapore's context, sits within an ecosystem, right? And in essence, what is a festival what are you in service to? I think one is to the artists that inhabit the land, to the audience, right? The people that occupy the land, your neighbors, and then there's these international ripples, right? That emanate from a place. And so I thought, yes, there is a desire to kind of create commissions, to commission works and to facilitate original and collaborative work that might have a that with the right ingredients then have this potential to move. But I also wanted to release the festival from that pressure also, right? Is it unsuccessful? Then if a work then just lands in the Singapore Festival and finishes there. And I thought it's perfectly, another way of looking at it is also, you see, artists have a trajectory, and artists, if you're inherently an artist, and if you're committed to your pathway as an artist, then you have a trajectory that should transcend these platforms. And then these platforms then become also a landing point for you to maybe shift and grow, push yourself, because you come into dialogue with the festival, who might then introduce you to, say, an international artist. And it sharpens your craft. And that, in a way, also helps you to move, because it expands your own, I guess, worldview and imagination of what you can do and articulate in the world. So I see that as also another function of these spaces, that we don't have to be too concerned and too worried about how important, or how important, in fact, these points are, and trust that artists will meet with you. If you meet with the artist with the same kind of mind, heart, and spirit, and just trust that artistic work will transcend artists, and the works transcend entities like institutions or venues or festivals.
Thank you. So what I would want to bring the discussion to now is, I mean, of course, we know that we all suffered during the pandemic, individuals, institutions, festivals, everyone alike. But the pandemic also has shown us some new possibilities. It has also shown us, it has also seen that people can embrace new forms, new ways of doing things. There has been examples of innovations, such as digitization, which is the embrace of technology, has been one of those globally. And also sort of innovative funding model, the background that I come from, film festivals, for example, have relied extensively, the smaller film festivals have relied extensively on community support, and they've survived and so on. I want to sort of now, sort of tabulate or build on what are the sort of innovations and the opportunities that you see in this post-pandemic context. And I would like to begin with Ratri, about coming to what we have learned through the pandemic years. What kind of innovations do you see in the festival world today that could stay with us in the long run?
Yeah. What was really amazing that came out of the pandemic for our context was that it created access. And this means, access because of, again, the IDF is easily considered as an exclusive festival just because its proximity in Jakarta. But once it opened up, and we lost a lot of things by programming an online festival back in 2020, but that also meant that people from all over Indonesia and in fact globally could easily participate without all the travel, without all the spending the resources. So that was really important and enabled our curatorial practice to actually be more aware and have more access of what's going on in the other parts of the country, first and foremost. And for us, specifically the trajectory or history of dance film creation, I think in the Western world is more already established, and this is one of the, not an innovation, but a lot of us then had to practice how to produce dance films or digital, dance through the lens. That was also a challenge that the artist was open to explore with us. So then we started creating online programmings, and we were afraid though that would replace the meaningful live exchange of performing arts. But it proved not, like, yeah. But I think that could stay with us, and the integration of digital and technology in the creation of the artist, that's also will stay, I assume, yeah.
Stefan, if I can bring you in the conversation, what are
Yes.
your thoughts about what is here to stay, what works, and what have we learned?
I think it's starting now, actually, even though we've been trying for a few years. What I saw in the artists I'm working with is that suddenly a project that was thought out for months or years to be presented on stage had to be squeezed into a screen. And that was not something easy to do, and it's not the knowledge we have as performing art people necessarily. So I have the impression that actually the COVID years were not so easy to deal with also in this term of adaptation. And also you're busy with a project, then everything collapses. It's not the best moment to get a new idea and start over. But now that we are slowly getting this pandemic behind us, I guess that we know this tool is available to us, and the artists can have, from the beginning of the idea, a conceptual place for digital platforms. So I think that's what I mean when it starts now. I also need to say it starts now for the audience, because the audience had to pay the price of bad projects. I was responsible of some projects that were not so successful because we were pushed to transform the stage performance into a digital one, and in some cases we accepted because it was the only way to survive. And for the audience, it's not always super good quality, and it's a bit discouraging. So now maybe we all had the side wheels on the bike, and we're removing the wheels, and we can develop new projects, having this experience on both sides. And I was curious to ask Natalie, Roberto, and Ratri also, how is it to advertise or promote digital content? For me, it's very, I'm totally bad with promotion, and how you reach out your audience to this, for me, would be interesting to hear.
Do you want to?
You mean promote the digital program specifically?
Yeah, how you promote a festival suddenly, instead of promoting a physical festival, you will have to promote a digital festival.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
what about the audience that has poor internet connection, or
Yeah.
what?
Yes, yes, we have all those challenges. But in our context, with the social media and all our technological gadgets, there is a thirst in the younger generation now to get into the arts. I mean, with the contemporary art scene in our country, it's still very far. We're still in the phase of educating the public about what is contemporary dance, because traditional dance is known, modern hip hop is known, but when it comes to contemporary, it's like, what is that? But so now it became very easy, because then all of the promotions was done through online, and because people didn't have anything really to do at home, so it was not that hard for us, especially Indonesians. They get into gadgets and social media very easily.
Do you think you had the same audience, or you had a
No,
totally
it's
new
been
audience?
renewed. Yeah, it's been renewed since then. In fact, one of the funny things, we just had our first live festival again after the pandemic in October, just a month ago. And one of the response in our social media was asking, so I heard that this young person said, I heard that the arts we see cannot be documented. So how can I update my status on social media? So, but this is interesting. Of course, we're accepting it. We're trying to tell them there are ways to enjoy the work, but because some of the work also already involve the VR and the AR and getting into, scanning a barcode, and then you get into that world. So the use of cell phones. So it's more like, it's less formal, like. Less proscenium, people are more engaged, and the young people are more engaged. So that's that's what's happening. And we were overflown, tickets were sold. It was, yeah, it was great actually after the pandemic, thank goodness.
Fascinating. I would take Stefan's question to Roberto and Natalie. Natalie, maybe you can first tell us how do you perceive technology audiences in post-pandemic scenario?
Well, I mean, first off, I think we have to acknowledge that we do live two lives. We live our actual life, and we do live a digital life. I mean, we're very connected to our phones, to our laptops. It's just part and parcel. It's embedded in contemporary life. So, and I find that in real life, I don't think there's one life is better than the other. I feel that you have to cut through a lot of toxicity and a lot of negativity to get to meaningful connections in real life, meaningful conversations, to nurture meaningful relationships. Just as much as you cut through the toxicity and I guess what's negative on the online space. So for me, when I came into the festival, and again, I came into the festival in 2020, in January, and then the pandemic happened. So I was I was amongst festivals, and me as a new festival director then just contending with a new way of looking at the festival. So when in the pandemic year, when it was a big pause, it gave me time to reflect, and I wanted to create a parallel track for the festival, a parallel digital track. So it was very intent. I was very intent in not having the digital space to be a backup space or to be a space if live performance couldn't happen. So I wanted to mine the digital space as creatively as possible. So I looked to artists that had been working with machine learning, with AI, with developing algorithms as part of their practice, as part of their artistic DNA, as opposed to artists who were applying these things, because of the pandemic. Now, I know that it was something that we all had to do. It was a survival. It was for survival, I think. But for me, in framing the festival, that was how I wanted to define this digital space. And so, to claim this idea of liveness in the digital space, my name for the digital space is Life Profusion. And I think it's an odd thing for a digital space. But I think that was what I wanted to kind of provoke, that it could be that the digital space can be like a body, or it can be like a paintbrush. Like you have to hone your body to be a dancer, you really have to discover how you push your craft, or a piano. You really have to understand the instrument, and you have to understand how it creates music and how it creates sound. I think to me that was what the digital space was for. If you were going to apply that digital space, then you needed to do it in the most artistically motivated and inspired way. So that was what I tried. That was the thinking that came out of the pandemic.
Roberto?
Yeah, I'm very much in line with you, and the fact that we consider the digital as space is very much inspiring in the way we use and inhabit that space. And I have to say that we discovered that it can be a place of more democracy, like a lot of horizontal ideas about how we relate, how we somehow transform the power structures in the digital space have new potential. So I think this is something we should bring forward. I think the digital space has offered also new forms of creativity. The way we organize, a workshop and divide people in rooms and then come back together can actually be activated with the rhythm, with creativity. So again, it's a place to be explored and where a lot of voices can meet. And this is the other potential. We don't need to travel anymore across countries, but we can actually find ways to share in a more, again, accessible way. There's another thing that Aerowaves has, in a way, piloted, I think, which was the use of the VR as a way to bring artistic works in places that, for instance, don't have a theater. So again, it was not just about filming with people that know how to film dance and make it beautiful in a VR structure, but also the way we decided to dispose the audiences, which would be in circles, so you physically perceive that you're not going through an individual experience, but you're connected with other. And then at the end of the, let's say, screening of a show, there would be a dialogue via Zoom with the actual authors of the work. So the authors could have an exchange with the audience that had seen and vice versa. And this had a great appeal, especially with the younger generations, like schools were immediately intrigued by this use of technology, and they went for that to introduce the codes of contemporary dance in contexts that otherwise would have never been reached. I have to say that a lot of choreographers have also conceived works that don't need people to travel, but they have maybe a technological setting that goes in places and activates the audience as the performers. There's examples of choreographic scores that are heard through specific devices that respond also to the movement of people. And again, they put in place an experience that is both individual and collective at the same time, where you have a concept that travels and not a team. So this is something really intriguing, and I think in that sense, festivals should be even more responsive to these kind of proposals, where sometimes you might have non-professional bodies performing, and what would that mean for those who participate?
I mean, just to sort of push that a little further, one tends to also wonder from the perspective of policy and funding, what the future of the pre-digital art form itself is in context to the festival. Are they threatened? I mean, if you don't have the digital innovations and you rely on the older forms, then do you think that there is a bit of a threat that they will not get accepted or funded, and they don't sound as exciting as a project which includes this vast use of technology would?
Well, I guess we need to change if we want to respond to changes. So as it was said before, the digital life is already something that applies to all of us. What I think is really important is to maybe from the perspective of a festival, consider that what you share in the frame of a restricted time amount is actually the work of 360 days per year. And how do you somehow bring artistry in that work? How do you connect with people and build credibility, trust, and participation? We know that in 15 years, the cost of flying will be very unaffordable. So we will have to choose where to go and how to take the best out of maybe 1 or 2 flights per year. So how are we going to design our proposals in a way that they're still attractive, generative, and transformative, and meaningful for the societies?
Thank you. So I thank you all for this wonderful conversation. But I think that enough of me asking questions. We'd open this to the audience right now, who would probably be bustling with ideas and questions and queries for you. So if I could ask Preeti to help us in passing on to the mic. since the event is being recorded today, it'll be great if you ask your question on the mic so that it can be audible not only here, but also in the recording. And we have a question that side. Yes. Please introduce yourself before asking your question.
Thank you very much. Good evening, I'm Silvia Ribeiro. I'm from Performing Arts Collective, which is based in Italy and work mostly and most successfully between Europe and Asia. And my question for you, my reflection and therefore question for you is that I would like to ask how you see the festival responsibility in terms also of artist challenges within especially the working council, because as you said at the beginning, festivals are places of joy, celebration, culture, and I would add work. And as an artist that has been working in a research, experimental domain for most of our lives, so therefore sometimes being on the line of between underground and some more institutional venues, and working between the two, I have to say that sometimes, more often, I have been finding deeper and slower, therefore more sustainable chances of work, of artistic research and development, and therefore also presentation, so meeting the public within cultural centers or more cultural institution, and much less in festival. And our reflection collectively was, is there anything about the rhythm of production that push festival in proposing quick and quickly eatable content that don't allow both sides, festival and artists participating to festival, to take it slower and have deeper research? Because for artists, I know for sure that is much deeper when you have multifaceted but slower and ways of interrogating your work, and therefore meeting the people also in very horizontal way, in co-producing, in co-creating, and also including the community of the place where you are, even a stranger place, within the artistic research. But that requires time. So my question, if it's festival have been thinking also in these terms, or see an answer on a way, on a horizon. Thank you.
I mean, just coming from the academic background, I think that one of the pressures that we as researchers face today was not only to sustain the pace of our production during the pandemic, but also sort of work within the same rhythm, and that's a challenge that's between the university and the academic. How do you perceive that in the art space? And Natalie, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I have a response to that. I think, with festival, I'll speak specifically to my context, but there are two kinds of works, and so because I think it's very important that that festivals also prize artists that are not that are fluid practices, so that that are not working inside, that sort of have that have definitions that are not so fixed, right? And if you prize this kind of originality, then I feel like there are two kinds of works that I look at. So there are ready works that you invite. So you invite a work that's sort of been produced, that's been made, and it synchronizes with maybe the artistic frame, the framing of the festival. But there is another, you need to create a space where, at least I believe in creating a space where you are also, the festival is having a long relationship with artists to create works that are carefully supported and sufficiently supported and are very experimental and risk-taking. And these conversations, to me, have to be at least a year long.
Yeah.
And then you put it, and you really, the festival just has to stand behind that, and you you facilitate conversation. It has to be gentle. It has to be slow. Things might go awry, but you always give space, and that for me is really important in empowering artists, whatever shape or form the artist takes. So I'm, like I say, we have to be like-minded, and I do think that we are like-minded. I think there are many progressive festivals have to find, or generous festivals have to find a kind of connection with each other too, and reinforce this sort of projections to support artists and to support the making of slow work, and then inviting work also that is curatorially considered, so that you present something in a very careful way, in a very thoughtful way, to communicate something. I mean, communication is something that we all need, right? And communication needs to be gentle and specific, and in some ways slow.
Thank you. Steve?
I would like also to react on the producer side or on the artist side. I think there are two questions in your question, or two comments. One, of course, is the sustainability of the artist is not only financial, and it's not only in relation to our impact, ecological impact, but it's also there was a tendency to push artists to produce more because I want the premiere. No, I want the premiere. Okay, then you have to do two premiere. And there was a big trend that I feel is disappearing or is dissolving, and it's a very good thing, that it's okay to show an old piece. It's okay to build a repertoire. It's okay not to have the premiere. And without that would make my life and the life of many very complicated. So this is a trend that is changing and has to continue changing in that sense. We should, I mean, you know it better than me, but oftentimes the premiere, the version that you put on stage on the premiere is just the beginning. It's just the first step. And when you play it 10, 20, 40 times, then you get to another level. And everybody benefits from that. Also the audience, also the people supporting the artist or supporting the festival. So I think this is one aspect of the question I wanted to address. And the other one, in my experience, there are more and more festivals who collaborate with the art centers. Personally, many artists I work with have benefited from festivals who say, okay, you are in this country, I'm working with an artist in a country in Asia where there is no venue to rehearse, where there is no money to work, where, I mean, and maybe people don't even live in the same city. And some festivals make that happen. And it's also, maybe not all festival, but I feel it's a trend that's appearing, and that the festival will say, okay, you dance center or you the theater, can you offer us 1 month of stage for those artists? Because otherwise we would not be in position to rehearse in the same venue that we have to present to the audience. And this is changing, but of course it's a lot of resources, and it can only happen if we don't squeeze the artist in 2 production, or even I feel 1 production a year is already a lot. I think it's too much, but a lot of funding cycles is, you get 3-year funding and you have to do 3 performances, which maybe will change.
Thank you. Should we take the next question?
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Evie. I'm from Indonesia. I'm an academic. I really like the note when you mentioned that festival should be able to give voice to diversity and inclusion. I was just wondering how festivals of arts in Asia and also in Europe ensure this diversity and inclusion, including during the pandemic. You mentioned about digitalization, but digitalization also has its own problem, that not everyone is literate, and also the infrastructure, for example, in Indonesia and Southeast Asia is not equal. I mean, in various areas, the infrastructure is not equal. So how festival can ensure that, they can give voice to the vulnerables and also minorities? Thank you.
Can I direct this question to Roberto?
Yes, you can. I think we have to consider how we collaborate among organizations and artists, and how the discourse can be shared from the beginning at that level. It's probably a new practice. It requires getting to know each other. So those who have been already exposed to the diversity of contexts might be the ones that have an advantage. But on the other hand, I think it's very important to think together, because, as you said, the contexts are different. The encounter with potential audiences would require different tools, probably. And what is it to produce something that will, reach and communicate and try to engage people that have a completely different background? So this requires a bit of time, but I also think that we shall not forget about the value of cooperating in person in the same space, and the fact that when we bring the different voices, in some parts of Europe, those voices are role models. There's still generations of youth that don't see themselves represented on the European stages. So we need to work with those specificities, sometimes beyond Europe.
Ratri, can you also share your thoughts on it, because the question came from Indonesia?
I think there's a lot of work to be done, yet we have to also choose which, by listening to what is happening around us, which we can prioritize. Both of the questions, I think I wanted to say something to your reflection. First, I think what you're referring being a festival, being an event that is tied to like an opening and a closing and in between, right? Everything is time-based. So we are, a presenting body as to begin with, but over time we've become like what Natalie was describing, also a really hands-on producer that mentors and assist the trajectory of specifically the career of Indonesian artists. So we work with artists over 16 years, 20 years, since when they were a student, who are just coming to the IDF to observe. And then 4 years later, they come as a young artist whom we commission to create a work in progress work. And then 4 years later, they would premiere a work. And now we're thinking about even being more of a management hand for the artist to help them thinking about the life after the premiere. Then who from from our network that would be receptive of the work and then support its touring. So that's what we are trying to do now, and not only being a presenting platform, who also don't own our own space. So yeah, but with I actually, that's a really, I don't think we can do everything. And coming from Indonesia yourself, with the questions of disabilities and lack of infrastructure, yeah. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. More questions from the audience?
It looks like there are none, but I have one. Sort of going back to the discussion about promotions for digital presentation. The thing is that when we are trying to present digital showcasing for festivals, we are also competing with a large plethora of digital content otherwise available. So would you like to share some experience of how you also tackled that? Thank you.
I think one of the things to do is to understand and preserve the language of art. And I feel like there is a language that is specific to art. And you can watch sort of like Netflix, and there's art and artistry sometimes in the writing, but there's also a kind of a formula, right? And you sort of, I think that the role of TV is sort of just to keep things. You need a story. It needs to be. I think you can embrace entertainment in TV in a kind of very direct way in television, but you've got to we have to fight for the space in art to be for this porous space. We have to fight for, and we just have to resist. Because it's important. You need a different tempo. We shouldn't be afraid of boredom. I think you make a point. I think you create meaningfully. I think you tell a story. But I think we shouldn't be pressured to just kind of. We shouldn't be competing. It's foolish to compete with entertainment, because that's not what it's about. So even in the digital space, you should just be. Yes, you will be competing with all this other stuff, but stay true to the cause. Preserve the language of art. Invest in artistic voices, because you need a voice of an artist to stand against the voice of a politician, to stand against a voice of a celebrity. These are the political voices and celebrity voices are so loud. And to counter that, to just offer a balance, I can only think of, the voice of artists, or maybe the voice of a river. That's it.
Can I say something? It may also help to build different narratives around the same proposal, and sometimes to bring the voices of people that are not in the profession, like citizens that share their experience, and they can give in a completely different way language to what the experience is about. We've noticed that sometimes opened the doors that none of the professionals could open. So I think we will have to build more and more ways to tell what we do, how we do it, who we do it for. And again, if it's not just the artists and the organizations doing that, maybe we'll discover something precious.
And if I add something to that, is that we should never forget that theater is a medium of proximity. It's building more or less in the center of a community. And even if we go digital, we should not forget that is our first audience. Of course, it's beautiful to be able to reach out further, but we're not Netflix, and we're not trying to make a product that will score big in the US and Indonesia at the same time. So knowing the audience and working with the audience, I think it's what will help us find our place there.
Yeah.
Thank you. If any new questions have come up from the audience? No?
So this was hand raised.
So then I would thank all our speakers and guests today for sharing their thoughts with us. Obviously, the message is that the show must go on, but it should not go on as it has gone on for years, but it should go on with new sets of values, of empathy, care, and the fact that we should be able to share them across the two continents of Asia and Europe. And I thank you, or everybody in the audience, and the organizers for inviting this panel and making this a successful event. Thank you so much. Yeah.